the fact that it was about war was a real question for me. Uh, I was making a movie in the Utah State Prison when they sent me the script. I was in that prison all day long, like 12 or 13 hours a day for 3 weeks. And it was not only the best pilot I'd ever read, it was the best thing I'd read while I was in prison. And I was glad to get out. But I had to wait until I was finished with the prison job uh, before I could say yes to it, because I wanted to make sure that they agreed with me that the war wouldn't just be a jovial background to hijinks. I didn't want to do hijinks at the front. The only recent example of a wartime comedy was McHale's Navy, which I thought was the kind of thing we wanted to avoid. I mean, everybody was amiable on that program and it was amusing, but it treated the war as just the job they had. I mean, it might have been the newsroom on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And I don't think war is a job. It's a horrendous event, every one of them. Uh, and the people who come back from wars tell you that, and all the research we did certainly confirmed that. And I felt I didn't want to be involved in something that painted war as a neutral or even amusing situation. I wanted, whenever we referred to the war, I wanted us to let everybody know that we knew what we were talking about, that it had this horrific element to it. I also saw that it was that it was going to be a hilariously funny show. But I wanted them both to be there. And I didn't know how they felt about that. That's not something you can talk about on the phone easily. So they had to wait until I was out of prison to have the conversation so that I could say, yes, I'll do it. And that happened to be the night before they were going to begin rehearsing. They had about 10 days rehearsal, and then we were going to shoot the pilot. So we sat up in a coffee shop in a hotel the night before we rehearsed, and we talked till about 2 in the morning, and they were in complete agreement with me. But I needed to be reassured of that, and then we agreed to do it. And I don't know if that conversation had anything to do with the way we did the show, but the fact that we did the show that way, I think, made a big difference between that show and just about any other comedy that had ever been on up until then, because we had very funny comedy. We had all kinds of comedy, burlesque, satire, every kind of comedy that you can think of. And we had the recognition that the war was acid, and we didn't drop either of those, and that gave us a combination that was surprising, and it helped the audience, I think, once they caught on to us, once they realized what we were doing and where we were, that it gave them a chance to appreciate the show the way you appreciate life. Life has high spots and low spots. Life is not a series of giggles the way most half-hour comedies have tended to be. So that's one of the things I think that made it interesting. It was, by the way, in my mind, not about the Vietnam War. I never thought we were doing a veiled reference. Well, I understood that there were connections because because it was another war, and it was another war set in Asia. But I didn't think we were trying to convince people of anything about the Vietnam War. I think Larry Gelbart saw a connection very clearly. In the opening shot of the first episode, it says Korea 100 years ago. Now, wasn't 100 years ago, it was 25 years earlier. But by that, I think he meant, we're going to tell you a story about a war now that took place a long, long time ago, but it's really about now. It was, to say 100 years ago was irony, I think. And I think Larry always looked at it that way. You'll have to talk to him about that, but I didn't really look at it that way. I just thought of us as doing the Korean War. Except that I thought that that war applied, what we had to say about that war applied to all wars. You know, it's not a good place to find yourself in.